I make sure that it doesn't get away of life. So I know some people, their entire lives revolve around pro wrestling, and that's awesome. That's great. That's fantastic. But I always make sure that there's still room for other things, right? Whether it's reading a book or playing video games or watching other things on TV. I know some people literally say like, "Oh, I only watch wrestling on TV." Like, no, like that's cool, but I also watch regular sports. I hang out with friends. I'll go have hobbies. Like this weekend, I had two fantasy football drafts, or, um, you know, and go out and go to the batting cages I went to last night as well. So I
Yeah.
always make sure to have other interests as well as wrestling. But wrestling's probably my number one hobby. But I always make sure to have time to do other things as well.
What's going on, guys? It's your boy, Tom Talks Rubbish, and stand back with another interview. This time, I'm joined by the one and only George Hermoza from Wrestling Inc. So, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure being here. I'm a fan of your work. I really dig what you're doing.
I really appreciate that, my friend. But if we take this back, where do you first discover wrestling as an overall fan?
Oh my God. Probably the earliest memory I have is probably when I was 5 or 6. I can't pinpoint exactly the exact moment. It must have been channel surfing, and just some of these larger than life characters just caught my eye, and I was literally hooked from day one. There was never any down period. There was never any like, oh, I stopped watching in high school or college, and then no, like there was always wrestling in my life. I just loved going to the magazine section, looking at all the wrestling
Mm.
magazines. I loved going to the toy section, looking at all the wrestling toys. But yeah, very early on, when I was 5 or 6, must have been channel surfing. Maybe a friend recommended it to me, and then I just was hooked. I was just enamored, enthralled. Every adjective or every uh what's the word of them synonym, every
Yeah,
synonym
yeah.
that is pretty much is equivalent to addicted. That was me when it came to pro wrestling.
What era are we talking about when you discovered wrestling?
I don't want to age myself, but no, it's probably like a late 80s, early 90s. So I was a big Hulkamaniac, Ultimate Warrior, Savage, Mr. Perfect, DiBiase, and mostly WWF, just because it was more readily available.
Mm.
I always felt like WCW was more like cable television, because it wasn't until I got cable and then the TBS, the Turner networks, where I discovered WCW. I knew of it because of the wrestling magazines and the PWIs and all that, but I was mostly a WWF guy growing up.
So, being a WWF guy, nowadays people that like one company tend to spew stuff at the other company, if you know what I mean. So,
Yeah.
what is your thoughts on that? Like, were you
Oh
that way
man.
inclined as a kid, or were you just
Uh
someone that's like, I like wrestling, let's move
I
on?
like I like wrestling. Let's move on. How much time do I have to talk about tribalism? No,
Oh, we
I
can.
think I think it's the stupidest thing out there. I apologize if I'm offending anybody, just because like it's almost as if it's a crime to like both. And it's like, no, man, it's all wrestling. It's all love. Like that you can like Pepsi and Coke. You can like, I don't know what you guys have in the UK, but out here it's, McDonald's, Burger King. Like there's a lot
Yeah.
of competition within similar areas, and it's all good. Like even if they were to air at the same time on the same day, like Raw and Nitro did back in the day, uh it's a lot easier to watch multiple programs in the same day. Like back then you literally had to choose, because yeah, VCRs existed, but it was like it was still difficult to watch both at the same time or watch both in the same day. Nowadays, especially when you had AEW and NXT, you can watch one DVR and then you can just watch the other one as soon as it's done. Like it's so easy. But I don't understand. I kind of want to give a little bit of advice to all the tribalism, whatnot, because we always see on the Twitter like, oh, the AEW diehards, and they just dislike everything that WWE does and AEW likes, and vice versa. It goes both
Mhm.
ways. Um, But so if you want people to take you seriously, just every now and then say something bad about AEW and people will probably stop taking you as a joke and say something nice about the other place. But I think it's so silly. And that's what I like about the wrestling group I have, around me, whether it's, people that I have with at Wrestling Inc. or that I used to do AfterBuzz TV.
Mm.
We loved it all. We loved it all. We dug it. We can talk enthusiastically about anything and everything, and it was just all good. Like I love all wrestling. I literally spend probably too much time a week watching wrestling,
Mm.
but I love it all. Everything has its pros and cons. I do think that because AEW is a little bit newer and maybe don't have the I don't want to say experience, but maybe like the life experience that WWE has. I do think they have a little bit more room for constructive criticism.
Mm.
But for the most part, I love what both companies are doing. I've loved what when WCW and WWF was around, ECW. I've literally loved any form of pro wrestling since day one.
You talk about there loving any form of pro wrestling since day one. Was there ever a point that maybe you look back now and you go, why was I watching during this point?
All the time. All the time. Sorry, I got
Maybe you
choked
have to
up just thinking
rewatch
about it.
something.
Yeah, it's easy to look back in hindsight, to be honest with you. I mean, maybe not at the time, because at the time it was just to me, it was just pro wrestling, and I loved it. But looking back in hindsight, I'm like, man, like I was still all in as a fan in '95. Oh man, like this time period was kind of boring, but yet I still because I not that I didn't know better, but it made no difference to me. It was just there. It was on TV. It was readily available. Um, Maybe just because I have a very like addictive personality where I can just get hooked on something and just, not really fade away easily. But yeah, it's easy to look back on some of the down periods, but at the time, I'm just like, this is like, for example, like the Attitude Era. Like I think the Attitude Era is one of the most overrated time periods in the history of pro wrestling. Not in a way where it's like bad, but I'm just like, I don't think it was that great. Like everybody talks about great matches, but like we didn't really see that many during Raw or SmackDown because it was all 2 3 minute matches. And I think that the whole like, oh, but it was more adult oriented and whatnot. Like I don't know. I think that's kind of silly. I think it was great because of the roster, because it had one of the greatest rosters in the history of pro wrestling. And I think people gravitated toward the characters, but I don't think people watch the Attitude Era go, oh, they're saying bad words now. We're seeing more cleavage and middle fingers. Like, I don't think that's why it was great. So that's what I mean by overrated. But overall, like, just, yeah, I just never really thought twice about at the moment to stop watching wrestling, regardless of how bad it was.
What is the one storyline then that you're like, uh, this and no, don't remind me of this.
Probably the Katie Vick stuff. That's probably that everybody's go-to, and rightfully so, just because
Yep.
it was. And it is, and my thing is, I'm very I don't know if it's because I went to school for business, but I can think as like, okay, what's the business sense of this? Who are they trying to get somebody over? Are they somebody trying to get somebody more over as a heel? And I just don't, especially with the follow-up, I don't really see what the benefits of that. What even like the Dr. Heine stuff with Jim Ross and Vince, like I didn't see the benefit of like why are we trying to put over like whatever it is that they're putting over. Like Katie Vick's not a real person unless they have her come back from the dead. That'd be that then we'd be onto something. But I just didn't see why they took so much time on that when it really had no payoff. It was just maybe just to fill TV. So I look at that as kind of like, oh, that's kind of cringe a little bit looking back.
There's moments in WWE, and I don't know if you feel this way. Where CM Punk said this line in his pipe bomb where he was like, Vince McMahon is a millionaire that should be a billionaire, I believe was the line.
Hmm. Yeah.
And there are moments in WWE that you're like, yeah, if you hadn't have done that, you would have been a billionaire sooner. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. You know what's fun? I was there for live for the pipe bomb.
Ooh,
June
really?
27th, June 27th, 2011, Las Vegas, Nevada. I live in LA, but I went to Vegas just for that show specifically, obviously not knowing that was gonna happen. And then I remember because it was actually a back-to-back tape. They were taping Raw live and they were taping the following week's Monday Night Raw after that Raw because it was 4th of July. They didn't want to, tape on the 4th of July, or they didn't want to go live on the 4th of July. So I remember the show ended. I'm sorry, not the show ended, but the Punk pipe bomb happened and my phone died. So I was like, all right, let me just enjoy the show anyways. So I watched the whole second part, or I watched Raw, the second one, thinking that, oh, there's no way that made air, because obviously he said a lot of things. I was like, man, me being the mark that I am, I'm thinking like, oh, there's no way Vince would have approved any of this stuff to be on live TV, let alone it was all on TV and the most talked about thing, for months. But yeah, with that said, I kind of agree with that, because I think about another angle that would just completely botch. I don't care what anybody says. The invasion angle from 2001,
Yeah.
and it's like you just wanted to inflate your own ego by having these WWF guys just, look dominant against your WCW guys. And that that was literally yeah, that could have been easily $1 billion angle. Especially when you think about it, that Invasion pay-per-view was like has more buy rates than a lot of WrestleManias.
Mm.
That just goes to show there was interest in that event, and they just pretty much dropped the ball by, not, making $1 billion with that angle when it should have. So yeah, I 1,000% agree. And good callback to Punk, what he said in that promo.
So you talked about there being there live.
Mhm.
Was there anything of the pipe bomb that you can remember that maybe didn't make air? That you're like,
No, every single word, was yeah. The only thing that I remember that did not make air because it was a bleep is the word like D-bag, but
hmm,
stretched out.
hmm.
Uh and I was like, oh, but they aired it like on the DVD release, but that was the only time where I was like, oh, like they tried to bleep that word, but I know what he said because I was there. But yeah, every
Yeah.
single word made air, and that's what kind of shocked me. We're like, man, like all those drop in the Colt Cabana, the Ring of Honor, the New Japan, the Brock Lesnar, the Paul Heyman, like all these names are like I thought they were like not allowed to say on TV,
Persona
and
non grata. I think
yeah,
that's the close.
exactly. And this was before Brock came back. This is before Paul Heyman came back. This is before, all that stuff. So it was like, man, like, yeah, I was utterly shocked when I was able to charge my phone and turn it on and be like, wait, that wasn't a dark match. That was 1,000% on TV. Like, yeah, I was shocked. And yeah, like I said, it was all anybody can talk about for a couple weeks.
I don't know how much you were on social media at that time, but do you remember the sort of instant social media reaction to the pipe bomb?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's not as big as it was now, but a lot of it was just, uh, yeah, like shock and awe, to be honest with you. Because that was what, 2 weeks before the money, 3 weeks before the Money in the Bank pay-per-view.
Hmm.
And I think a lot of it was just more getting more interest. Uh, and because I think his contract was expiring, right? So a
Legit
lot of people
expiring,
just
yeah.
think, and so a lot of the chatter on social media was, he's on his way out anyway, so he doesn't care. He's leaving anyway, so he's just gonna say whatever he wants. So I feel like that was a lot of the reaction toward that. But yeah, it was, again, it was something that really was nonstop, at least until, maybe like a month later when he kind of came back and became like, stayed with WWE, ended up signing a new contract and everything.
We've talked about some hot angles there. What were some of the lesser known angles that you said you've never had a break since the 80s? What were some of the lesser known angles that have kept you watching since being a fan?
Well, it not so much lesser known, because I feel like a lot of things thrive on like characters,
Mm.
as opposed to story. Like, are you a big Tarantino fan? Like, do you watch like Pulp Fiction or anything like
I've
that?
watched some. Yeah.
So I look at Pulp Fiction as a perfect example. He's so good at creating characters where you literally have one of the opening scenes of Pulp Fiction. They're talking about, yeah, I went to France and they called it Royale with cheese and, Le Big Mac or whatever it is. And I'm like, this movie is not like a buddy comedy. This movie is just, this about not it's not about this, but it's like, there's these two contract hitmen just, going to the location. But I can hear these guys talk all day because it's entertaining, because that's how great he was good at making characters matter. So I feel like with a lot of these things, I think there's just like like the even with like a John Cena. Um, I think it was so important for him to be who he was because a lot of us can relate to that. And I know there was a lot of John Cena hate around at some point, but I was always a big fan and I love like there was one time where they kind of started to boo him and he comes out and says, listen, if you guys love me, like, thank you, I appreciate you, thank you for coming along the journey. And if you don't, I mean, if you don't like me, then y'all can just kiss my ass. And that was just like, okay, like, if he's a heel, if you're booing him, then he's a heel in your eyes. If he's a baby face, then or if you're cheering him, then he's a baby face in yours. So I like little instances that you think that maybe don't really mean much in the long run but really have a lasting effect. It's kind of a little like subliminal, where you
Yeah.
don't notice it at these times, but in the long run, it's like, okay, I see what they're doing. Um, with that said, like, things that kind of made me even bigger fan, because I was never close to leaving as a fan, but if anything, when like the NWO started, that was like, oh, I remember that was all we can talk about at school. Like who's going to be more, he's going to be a member of the NWO, things like that. Who's going to join the NWO? When DX started, then we saw a bunch of people crotch chop in my school. So it's things like that that kind of I noticed when there's a lot of people that normally don't talk about it. That's when I'm like, okay, like they're on to something good right now.
Hmm. I understand what you're saying completely there. So you also brought up the fact you were a big Hulkamaniac
Hmm.
during when you first started. So what was your reaction to Hogan's heel turn in WCW?
In '96, I was shocked. I didn't see it coming, to be honest with you. There are people out there that just even people today. Like I was watching like NXT, and like Roxanne Perez has such a likable look. Where I'm like, man, it's kind of hard to buy her as a heel
Mm,
because she just has a great good look she reminds me of Jenna Ortega where she's like oh like they just have a likable look they just have a nice sweet face in a good way like that just oozes baby face. So when Hogan, I'm like, oh my God, like he had that, not just in the look, but also like the personality. Like, man, this guy's not gonna tell me to stick it. He's telling
yeah,
me to say my prayers and eat my vitamins. Like, of course, like he's not gonna be a bad guy. But when he did, and not just turning heel, but kind of going all the way, going full heel right? He's not out there like he changed the look. He went all black, telling everybody that, to stick it, brother. Yeah, it was shocking and probably one of the best, if not the best heel turn of all time.
that's really, really cool. So how do you get into the sort of we talked about after Buzz TV off air and things like that? How do you realize then I like wrestling? I'm gonna start doing some work covering it.
So as you clearly see right now, I just like talking about wrestling. Whether it's here, whether it's with buddies and I think we're all in like a lot of group chats. I'm personally like in maybe three or four where we just
Mm,
talk wrestling. Like it can be and we can talk about other stuff, but it's literally wrestling brought us together. So I'm doing it anyways, right? And it was something that I was always interested in. When I started doing it, there wasn't really that many wrestling platforms that there is now. And AfterBuzz TV was more they did a little bit of everything. It wasn't just wrestling. It was they're talking about The Bachelor. They're talking about, Grey's Anatomy. They're talking about, sports. It's really like a place for just a bunch of after show. So it really was a kind of a community. And then when I saw that they were doing like Raw recaps, I think it was like early days with like Maria Kanellis and Candice Michelle and like Lillian Garcia. And I was like, oh wait, and it's like a couple miles from my house. Like I really wanted to be involved. Um, and so I saw that I ended up having some friends that was doing stuff there. And initially they got me in to cover like MMA. So I was
mm.
like, okay, well then, now I'm in the door. So now it's time to, try to get into the wrestling landscape of AfterBuzz TV. And just slowly but surely it just, found a place for me and just mostly cover the pay-per-views. And, if somebody needed to fill in like on Raw after show or SmackDown after show, or even I think we covered like main event, NXT or whatever that things. I always threw my name in a hat, and yeah, and then the community just ended up growing. I met some amazing people there. Great, fantastic people, Jack Farmer, Flobo Boyce, Evan Mack, to name a few. And yeah, it was just, yeah, the community was mostly just a great place to be at, to the point where I think COVID kind of changed a lot of things in terms of
Yeah.
people realizing that they could do it themselves as well. I think for me, I was watching ESPN, which is like obviously the biggest sports network in the world,
Mm.
and they're having to adjust as well because they're not going to the studio, and they're million and God bless
Sorry.
you, they're not going to the $1 million studio. They're literally recording from home. And I'm like, oh, I'm sure a lot of people are like, wait, we can do this too. Just buy a nice little webcam, have a little setup. And that's kind of what opened the door, I think, for a lot of other people to do like watch alongs and
Yeah.
recaps and all these things where at AfterBuzz we went to a studio to record these things. Now it's like, okay, well, maybe we don't need to leave our house for these things. So I think that kind of helped out a lot too. But yeah, for overall, just it's something that I always found myself doing. And I'm like, okay, well, why not try to talk to a bigger, try to find something where my voice can spread out even more. And yeah, AfterBuzz TV was really the first one to allow me to do that.
What year was it you joined AfterBuzz TV?
2014.
Ah. So wrestling at this time is accepted in the mainstream, but not as much as, say, Grey's Anatomy and things like you
Yeah.
talked about there. So did you have any pushbacks from any of your colleagues being like, oh, you cover the wrestling side? Do you know what I mean?
No, because the people that owned AfterBuzz TV was actually like a mainstream person, like Maria Menounos, who we all, WWE loves and always does
Hmm.
something with them, and a guy that's kind of getting a lot of FaceTime these days, her husband, Kevin Undergaro, who now is Mercedes Monet, like business partner, manager, agent,
Yeah,
all the above, and he's literally traveling with Mercedes. So they've always been very involved with pro wrestling. And so
Maria's
I
even
think
had a few matches, if I remember correctly.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. And Kevin, just talking to Kevin, like very smart guy, but just talking to him, it's like, okay, this guy gets it as well. He gets the pro wrestling aspect and getting involved. So um there was never any pushback because the people up top at the tippy top really got what pro wrestling and the
Hmm.
appeal and really was, if anything, was always trying to push forward um with getting more wrestling out there, even to the point where I think 20 no, so I had a meeting with Kevin in like late 2014, and he was pushing to like do like more after shows, but in Spanish. And me being bilingual, he was trying to get me involved with
Hmm.
that. And it was a few years before we finally pulled the trigger and said, all right, let's cover Monday Night Raw, but in Spanish and try to crack that because there's a big Latin market as well. But yeah, so he always had his finger on the pulse when it came to wrestling. So yeah, there was always whatever the opposite of pushback was, there was
Push
that. And
forward.
after yeah, push forward. There was always a lot of pushing forward for wrestling and AfterBuzz.
That's really cool to hear. Obviously, we all know what a great personality Maria Menounos.
Hmm.
I can never say her last name. Maria
Yeah,
Menounos is in front
Manunos,
of
yeah.
the camera. But
Hmm.
do you have any sort of fun behind the scenes stories with her?
Unfortunately, not really too many. I feel like she was always very busy. So it was more her husband Kevin kind of hands-on with the AfterBuzz. Like they would have like Hollywood party or not Hollywood, but like holiday. I meant to say holiday.
Yeah, I
Uh
remember.
oh yeah, holiday parties. I don't know what I said. I think you know what's funny? I meant to say oh no, Hollywood. I said Hollywood, but I meant to say holiday, but then I almost said Halloween. Okay, sorry. So it was a lot. They always had like holiday parties or like a summer party and just little interactions like that. She'd be, thank you for, she'd talk to like a group of us, thank you for representing the wrestling portion of AfterBuzz. Um, and always very grateful. She knew that that always helped with the channel as well. I mean, the big shows were like 90 Day Fiance and then The Bachelor were always big ones too, but she was always very appreciative of the wrestling coverage. So it wasn't necessarily any like intriguing personal stories, but it was a lot of like gratefulness. right? A
Yeah.
lot of like, hey, thanks for covering that. If you ever need me to come on, I'm always, if I can, I'll help. I'll come and talk about wrestling and whatnot. But for the most part, it was always just being grateful and also for me, like for me being grateful for being on AfterBuzz and allowing me
Yeah.
to have that platform to talk about something to talk about anyways. But yeah, it's a lot of just mostly that.
Did you leave after Buzz, or did anything happen before you joined Wrestling Inc. sort of thing?
COVID happened. Um,
Ah,
COVID happened. So I never left after Buzz. Honestly, I'd probably still be there if I had a chance, just because they actually did provide me with a lot of neat opportunities. Even like going back to WrestleMania 31 in San Jose. Uh, I pretty much was there and got to experience so many things because of AfterBuzz, whether it's getting access to WWE access and being able to interview a lot of wrestlers. By the way, I'm not going to tell you to not look it up, but man, did I suck in some of those interviews.
we'll get to
Uh
that.
yeah, did I suck? So it's kind of cringe for me to watch, but I don't care. It's all fun. But yeah, so just going to the Hall of Fame, going to the NXT show, going to WrestleMania and getting floor seats, getting going to Monday Night Raw. It's all because of my affiliation with AfterBuzz. So I'm very grateful. But with that said, COVID happened and then so we couldn't go into the studio. So then we were doing a lot of coverage from home. Uh, you know, covering the pay-per-views. Other people were covering Raw and SmackDown and whatnot. And then things just kind of went on hiatus and never really came back. And so that's what kind of happened. This was back in 2020, like summer of 2020, I believe.
Mhm.
So I know they're still the studio's still there. I noticed that Mercedes Monet still does some stuff at the studio, it looks like. And yeah, if they ever need me, I probably will always answer my phone for them. So, if they ever need anything, I'm here.
Fair enough. Then how does the opportunity with Wrestling Inc. come about then, my friend?
So going back to what I said earlier, having meeting some amazing people at AfterBuzz, one of those people was Jack Farmer.
What a
And
guy. I love that
yeah,
guy.
yeah. And so he reached out and it was like, hey, and we always keep in touch. Like I have my own wrestling channel where we interview guys and I'll get into that in a bit, but he's kind of one of my main people that I use just because he's so good. He's so polished. He's so like and plus I not so much of a secret as far as like I want to always be friendly with them because I always feel like it's only a matter of time before he gets signed by somewhere some major company. So, I kind of want to get that in. If you're watching Jack Farmer, don't forget about me when you get signed. I like free tickets to stuff. But anyway, so he reached out and hey, like Wrestling Inc. might is looking for somebody. Do you want to put your name out there? Not sure if you'd be interested. And I'm like, yeah, absolutely. I have a weird schedule when it comes to like work, so sometimes I'm not always available. So I always wanted to kind of let people know up front, like, hey, if I'm available, I'm all in. No pun intended. But just to give you a heads up, like sometimes my work can be weird. Like I don't have a set schedule, but sometimes I can be on, you know, working for 12, 14, 16 hours a day. So I'd love to commit to whatever I can. And they were like, absolutely. Like, thank you for letting us know. And then we're able to work it out. If they had me on a lot for that first week to kind of see how everything is, but it looks like I'm covering for the most part every Dynamite every Wednesday. And if I can't make it, I'll let them know. And they're like, okay, cool. Thanks for letting us know. And then, I'll continue next week. But that's kind of how everything came about. And I love it there. I love the people going back to what I mentioned earlier. Like everybody that is there at Wrestling Inc. is just so great. Um, the last person that we got was Emily May, who another AfterBuzz alumni. Like
Yeah.
what a treat she is. Like she is amazing. She's doing her thing. She's in England right now for All In, or she was in England for All In. She's going to be going to Germany for Bash in Berlin. So I'm happy that she joined the team. But yeah, and meeting new people, like a Glenn Rubenstein, like a John Jordan, like a Jimmy Corderas, that I former WWE referee, who's just, again, they're all just fantastic people, and I can't say enough about everybody at Wrestling Inc. as well, especially the people behind the scenes.
What does it mean, do you think, to the uh, credibility of Wrestling Inc. that they have someone like a Jimmy Corderas who worked for WWE on their platform?
Oh, it adds so much, and not just him, but I know they used to have like a Matt Morgan on the show regularly. But just having Jimmy Corderas there as well, because he's got that like 20-year career there where he was there in the trenches. He knows what it's like to, when in the highs and the lows, right? And
Mm,
just having him there, and there'll be times where we're talking during a show and I'll be like, I just want to pick his brain about something, and not something random, but something related to whatever it is that we're
like
watching.
a specific moment, for example.
Yeah, or just like the situation where it's like, hey Jimmy, like in your situation, like what would you do, or what was the reaction backstage, and how did that affect maybe the overall landscape of the show? And he'll answer honestly. I think we brought up like the Jacques Rougeau Dynamite Kid fight not too
Mm.
long ago, because we saw Dynamite Kid's nephew, I guess the new Dynamite Kid on Dynamite. But yeah, just he adds so much credibility. And I mean, just to be honest with you, like in no shame in saying this, but anybody that kind of has been there, whether it's WWF, WCW, anything, adds always a bunch of credibility to whatever it is that's being done. And we can only use that as, just great lessons to learn as well. So yeah, it adds so much that he's there.
What has been, what was the transition like? Because unless I'm mistaken, you was covering everything for AfterBuzz TV on the wrestling side.
I was covering mostly the pay-per-views.
Ah,
And then also, when we were there, like in the last year or two, uh, Eric Bischoff has his own podcast, and another person after Buzz, another good friend of mine, his name's Steve, he reached out to that, the Conrad shows, right? The Pritchard, the Bischoff, and said, hey, like I can do a lot of stuff for you on YouTube. And he helped out a lot with that. He's like probably one of the main reasons why wrestling is so prevalent on YouTube these days, to
mm.
the point where during his friendship and relate business relationship with Eric Bischoff, we were able to add on like a 1 hour show. At We shot it at AfterBuzz, but we put it on Eric Bischoff's the YouTube channel. So that's something else that I did
Oh wow.
at AfterBuzz. It was produced by AfterBuzz, but it was on the 83 Weeks YouTube channel. It was me and Christy Olson, another AfterBuzz person. But so that's something else that I did on a weekly basis there. And then when I could, I wasn't always available, or they didn't always need a plus one, I would help out doing the Raw or the SmackDown, but I was mostly doing the pay-per-views or the PLEs, whatever you want to call them, though that was mine. 83 weeks, or the 1 hour show on 83 weeks, or with Bischoff, and then the Spanish Monday Night Raw coverage.
Mm.
So that was mostly, and then we had like the Raw team that was like Jack Flobo, Evan and Mack before he got signed with WWE. SmackDown was more like Christian Rosenberg, Gabby, and like one more person I can't remember who it was. But yeah, so we all kind of had our teams. Um, and then yeah, we'd always help out if we needed somebody who couldn't make it, then we'd call somebody and like, all right, cool, yeah, I can come by and help out. But yeah, I mostly did the pay-per-views over at AfterBuzz TV.
So that leads me to my question of like, how does it, how does, do you transition from watching and reviewing a pay-per-view and writing notes and whatever you have to do for your prep process for the pay-per-view, which is monthly, to then having to do it weekly for Dynamite? How does that change your fandom at all?
It doesn't, because I'm watching it anyways, so the great thing about what I do and everything that I've done is it wrestling wasn't like a hassle for me, right? It wasn't. I've never been like, I guess I gotta watch 3 hours of Raw because I'm watching it anyways. I gotta watch Dynamite as soon as it comes on. I'm watching it anyway. So it really made no difference, to be honest with you. Um, because like I said, I'm a fan. Like I don't want to like if there's like a PLE this weekend, like I'm not gonna wait till Tuesday to watch it. I'm gonna watch it live because I wanna
Mm,
I hate spoilers. Like I cannot stand spoilers. If you tell me that Bash in Berlin was already taped, but it's gonna air on Saturday, I guarantee there's a large amount of people that are gonna be like, ah, let me just because I used to be like that. I used to read SmackDown spoilers all the time, but I was like, what am I doing taking away the fun aspect of pro wrestling? Like, part
yeah,
of the greatness of pro wrestling is the shock element,
the
right?
live
Like
reaction.
yeah, the live reaction, all that stuff. So I'm like, why am I taking that away? So with that said, I'm watching this stuff anyways. So whether it's monthly, whether it's weekly, whether it's daily, it's all the same to me. So there wasn't really much of a difference. So yeah, it's just a matter of like now I have somebody to talk to. Now I have some people to talk about it with on a regular basis as opposed to monthly. So now I got weekly.
Mm, that's really, really cool. What about being burned out though? How do you maintain that sort of?
That's
Oh,
a that's sorry, yeah,
oh,
my dog. That's
that's
a
cool.
great question. Because I think about that all the time. I'm like, man, I know I watch too much wrestling. The only show that I don't watch uh with an urgency is TNA.
Mm,
Um, and I think part of it is because it's not live. So I'm like, okay, well, if it's that urgent, then have it live. But I find I make sure that it doesn't get away of life. So I know some people their entire lives revolve around pro wrestling, and that's awesome. That's great. That's fantastic. But I always make sure that there's still room for other things, right? Whether it's reading a book or playing video games or watching other things on TV. I know some people literally say like, "Oh, I only watch wrestling on TV." Like, no, like that's cool, but I also watch regular sports. I hang out with friends. I'll go have hobbies. Like this weekend, I had two fantasy football drafts, or, um, you know, and go out and go to the batting cages I went to last night as well. So I
yeah,
always make sure to have other interests as well as wrestling. But wrestling's probably my number one hobby. But I always make sure to have time to do other things as well.
that's really, really cool. What about on the content side, when maybe you've got to record a Dynamite review and you're like, this show really didn't give us anything to talk about, or I'm just not in the right frame of mind to record? How do you keep yourself motivated and not burned out in that respect?
I think it's mostly because I can talk about this stuff forever. Because I think that there's always can be something to talk about. Maybe if there wasn't anything newsworthy, or I guess
Mm.
the main question, the main answer is you find the news, right?
Yeah,
If there's nothing newsworthy talking about, or nothing worth talking about that was newsworthy, then that's the story. Why wasn't there anything to talk about? Why was there nothing memorable here? Does that reflect on the company? Does that reflect on the wrestlers? Does that reflect on the promoter? Or when all else fails, you pivot to to the other place and say like, well, when you think about it, like WWE can do this and that, So it's you just find the story. If there's nothing memorable, and if there's just like, okay, well, this wasn't good, so that's a story. Why wasn't it good? You kind of find a way to pick it apart. Um, so yeah, it just even when there is no story, that's the story in itself, if that makes sense.
yeah, totally. What about chemistry with your co-host? Because I know you do the recap with Jack. So what was your chemistry like immediately when you did the first recap?
So thankfully, as mentioned before, like everybody is just so amazing, to be honest with you. And I know that's like a kind of a cop out answer, or maybe the easy answer, but it goes a long way when a lot of people kind of share that positive energy. I'm not like a spiritual person, but I am a big like an energy person
Oh yeah.
where I'm just kind of like if somebody's exuding like a negative energy. Cool. I'll see you later. Cause I ain't because it's contagious. Like I ain't trying to get a whiff or any kind of whiff of that kind of negative energy. And thankfully, the complete opposite is with a lot of the colleagues that I have, where they're just always positive energy. There's always something to talk about. There's always something to laugh about. I think it maybe helps, or maybe it doesn't help. And I think it maybe helps that I ramble a lot, and there's a lot of like
Mm.
I can, when it comes to certain eras in wrestling, mostly like 89, 90 to like maybe 2010, I can remember things really easily. So if somebody references something, I can pinpoint. Like even now, when you said like, oh, the pipe bomb, oh, June 27th, 2011, because I was there,
Yeah.
and it's just easy, so it's easy to remember certain things like that. But overall, just the energy. That's I think that's what kind of creates chemistry is the energy. And now we're getting scientific right now, but it really is
No.
true. Like the positive energy creates good chemistry. And that's kind of how everything is. Like even with Flobo, like I text Flobo all day, all the time, just about like baseball stuff. So it's cool to be able to like have this kind of conversation that is goes beyond wrestling as well.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how we have it over at Wrestling Inc., where it's like, these colleagues, acquaintances, slowly but surely, or maybe rapidly become friends to the point where it makes it a lot easier to be on air with these guys
That's
and
really
and girls.
that's really, really cool. Who is the person that you're like, yay, I'm on the recap with them tonight. This should be a good one.
Just because it was so fresh in my mind, I'm gonna go with Emily May,
Mm,
just because her energy, and we all have great energy, but her energy is so infectious, so positive. I was with her for her first show at Wrestling Inc. This was like 2 weeks ago. We were covering NXT. And just what a great human being.
mm,
What a fantastic human being she is. And John Jordan as well. When I talk to John Jordan, and he's more of like a kind of like a fill-in every now and then. So he doesn't have like a regular, he's not part of like the regular programming, but there was one weekend where it was me and him covering SmackDown, Money in the Bank, and then the NXT one after that. And I'm like, man, and I told him like, it's a shame that you live in Florida because if you lived in LA, I feel like we'd be hanging out a lot.
that's really,
Um,
really cool.
yeah, so things like that. So yeah, yeah, those are the ones that stuck out the most. But of course, love to anyone and everyone over there because they're all just delightful to be around.
That's so cool, my friend. As we look at wrapping this up pretty soon, because believe it or not, we've been going for 40 minutes. And I do want to be respectful of your time, my friend.
No,
I'm curious to
take
know.
all the time you need. I'm more than happy to be whatever you need. I'm more than happy to contribute.
I'm really pleased to hear that. I'm curious to know, you talked about being a fan first and things like that. What is your advice for people that I'm in an orange and want to start on this podcasting journey? What is your advice for them?
Just do it. I know it's easier said than done, but even me, because COVID was weird, right? Like,
Mm,
it was a weird time, and that there was a lot of downtime. Like, even when you're at home all day, there's only so many books you can read. There's only so many TV shows you can watch. There's only so many movies you can watch. I mean, and the thing about wrestling is like there's new content literally like I'd say maybe 12 to 15 hours a week.
yep,
There's literally new content every single week. So there's always something to talk about. And it's pros and cons, like how easy it is to just create content these days. Like it's amazing. I know people are always so critical of people on their phones on a regular basis, but it really is that easy to make content. So even me, where I'm like, I'm talking wrestling with these buddies all day long. Why don't I do something where I just put it on YouTube? I have a nice network of friends, and let's do something. And I saw other people doing their things. Jack was doing his thing, Flobo was doing his thing. I saw other people doing their thing, and I was like, all right, cool, let me do it. So I found kind of like a something to talk about. And I didn't want to be like everyone else, so I kind of found like okay, let's talk about this, or let's interview this person about that stuff.
mm,
And I just did it. It was that simple. I just did it. I use iMovie to edit, even though I think there are better editing programs out there. And I know editing can be very, very, very intimidating.
Yeah.
Uh, because I hate it. But it's iMovie is probably the easiest in my opinion. Like I said, I know there's a lot of things that are better, but I was thinking more simplicity. And again, I just did it. It's that simple. I just did it. And it helped during COVID because everybody was home and available all day, every day. So that helped a lot. But again, you just have to do it. If something is as easy as content creating, the hard part is the easy part is creating content. The hard part is getting it out there,
Oh yeah.
or getting eyeballs on it. So that's the hard part, and there's a science to that I haven't figured out yet. But there is just do it. It is my advice. Just do it, and then it's better to have the content and figure out how to put it out there as opposed to not having the content and trying to put it out there.
Mhm. I understand what you're saying completely there. As we look at wrapping this up, I have two questions for you before we do my
Hmm.
staple wrap up questions.
Yeah, yeah.
If you stepped away from wrestling media tomorrow, would you view your career as a success? And what would you want your legacy to be?
I think so, just because it was never defined by my life was never defined by wrestling media. So I have a lot of other things going on. Like uh again, this is stuff I'm doing anyways. The only difference between what I'm doing is I'm doing it in front of a webcam now. That's
Yeah,
the only difference, right? Like, uh, don't get me wrong. There's not like a wrestling club that I go to that where we talk about, that'd be cool if there was. But again, whether it's group chats, whether it's sometimes calling somebody on the phone, be like, oh man, like, what do you think of this? Or, what do you think of that? And so I'm doing it anyways. It's just a matter of whether or not there's a camera in front of me or not. So if it all ended, like I'm okay with it. Uh, I'd still be talking about wrestling, just not in front of a camera. But it's nice to kind of have, even like somebody like yourself reaching out or somebody on Twitter kind of saying like nice words, right? Like every now and
yeah,
then, like I'll go on the YouTube or I'll go on the Apple podcast and look at reviews and seeing nice people that say nice things. There are people that say not so nice things, but I really, really, really don't care. And if anything, even if somebody does say something not nice, the best thing to do is own it. Every now and then I'll get a negative comment on YouTube, right? Oh, so like, oh, that George, man, he's annoying to listen to. And then I'll literally comment, I'll respond to that comment. I'm like, if you think he's annoying to listen to, try hanging out with him. So that's the main thing. Is I own it, right?
yeah,
I don't know if you're being constructive or or people are just being mean, but I'm not gonna give them that power. I'm gonna take the power for myself by by whatever you're trying to do, I'm going to up whatever you're trying to do. You're going to say I'm annoying to listen to. I'm going to say, oh, well, try hanging out with me. Then you'll be even more annoyed. I'm taking the power back of whatever it is that you're trying to do to me. So those negative comments never really affected me. Um, so I'd be okay with it. So I'd hope my legacy would just. I want my legacy to be somebody who was honest, somebody who didn't speak really necessarily with opinion, spoke with facts, and somebody who just loved it. Because almost every whenever I see like a really negative comment or just like a dumb, stupid comment on Twitter with the whole tribalism thing, and if people look at my replies, it's always just trying to be like, yo, like I don't know why you're trying to. And again, I have a theory when it comes to all those silly trolls, where it's like, I think they're just doing it for engagement. Whatever, it
yeah.
is what it is. But it's just a matter of like why are you like even yesterday, right? I saw all these comparisons. I was like, oh, All In is already better than WrestleMania. And I saw some even sillier comparisons, like, oh, All In is already better than Bash in Berlin when it hasn't even happened yet. And like all these
What?
comparisons, and I'm like, the fact that you even have to mention WWE to begin with, goes to show that your opinion, whatever you're trying to do, is completely irrelevant. You
Mm.
don't have to put something down in order to build something up. And I say that all the time because we all do it. I'm sure I've done it at some point, but that whole comparison thing, you're just doing it to put something down. And I'm like, no, like you can completely build something up without mentioning anyone else. I can sit here and say, I can sit here and say, oh my, because this is my God's honest truth. After I saw All In yesterday, I can sit there and say, man, All In, like what a great show that was. That main event was, oh my God, what a great main event that was. That was one of the all-time best matches I've ever seen, in AEW. Like Bryan Danielson's moment, what a great moment that was. Like that's it.
Yeah.
But instead, we're seeing a lot of like, oh, Bryan Danielson's, oh, that was way better than his WrestleMania 30 win. Oh wow, Swerve, man, he's so great. He's doing so much better in AEW than he was in WWE. And I'm like, I get what you're trying to say, but like you don't need to mention the other people to get your point across. So that's kind of a lot of my mentality as far as like I just want people to notice that you don't have to put something down in order to build something up. So if
Yeah.
anyone else can kind of stick to that mentality, then that's what I would want my legacy to be in terms of, the wrestling media landscape, or just in general, where it's like you don't have to compare to get your point across. You can completely praise one thing without putting something else down.
That's really, really cool. As we look at wrapping this up, George, because I do want to be respectful of your time, we're going to do a segment that is a staple on this channel called Generic Wrestling Questions. Those of you
Ooh,
that have seen my interviews before will notice where I'll ask George his favorite match, favorite overall pay per view card, favorite wrestler's entrance theme, favorite tag team, and favorite wrestler. Basically, the questions I assume George might be asked on social media. So now he'll have a place to be like, I've answered this. Please go watch this. So, what's your favorite match of all time?
man, this changes all the time. Right off the top of my head, I gotta say Undertaker Shawn Michaels from WrestleMania 25.
Why does that one speak to you as a fan?
Man, because I remember watching that match. I remember I was watching it at my buddy's house, and we were like, when Shawn Michaels kicked out of that first tombstone, it was a literal out of body experience. Like I could not believe that happened. And just thinking back, that always sticks out to me. That match, just because it was so great. It was two guys that were just perfect wrestlers. Um, and just yeah, it was just the best match I've ever seen in my life.
What about your favorite pay per view card?
I think the easy answer for everybody is WrestleMania 17, and I think that's not my answer because I think that, or I think that's everybody's go-to because I think WWF at the time was never any higher, and there was never two guys more at their peak more than Rock and Austin. With that said, I gotta go with I gotta go with the recent one. I gotta go with WrestleMania 40. Both nights. Yeah, I think that was just a masterpiece altogether. I think that's one of the best pay-per-views ever. The ending, Cody winning was just absolutely phenomenal. And yeah, WrestleMania 40 is just that's gonna really think gonna go down all time as really one of the best pay-per-views ever.
It's really, really cool. What about your favorite wrestler's entrance theme?
Entrance theme, it's gotta be Demolition. Like that rock kind of aspect, like here comes the axe, here comes the smash, just hearing that music. I'm doing like I'm working on something like SummerSlam related for my channel, but I'm watching back a lot of the SummerSlams and just hearing that music just puts me in a mood and just like I wish they can find a way to use that entrance music today. I know why they don't, but yeah, that's Demolition's like all time.
What about your favorite tag team?
That's tough. That's a really tough one. I'm a big No, no, let me ask you something real quick. Favorite and best are two different things, right?
In my personal opinion, yes.
Yeah, yeah. Because I think the best is Dudley's. I'm a big fan of this. I knew you were gonna ask me that question, yet I always have trouble answering. Uh, I'd have to go with Arn Anderson and Tully Blanchard.
Oh,
They were just masters in the ring. I think they are so good. They had a match against the Hart Foundation at SummerSlam '89 that was just a masterpiece. But those guys just work well together. I think Tully Blanchard is one of the greatest heels of all time. I wish they had a longer run. But yeah, it's got to be Arn and Tully.
well, and then finally, George, the biggest generic question, in my opinion: who is your favorite overall wrestler?
Uh, for the longest time, and it still is, it's got to be Shawn Michaels. His everything is I'm gonna say his selling's perfect, but his everything is pretty much perfect. Whether it's the selling, whether it's the moves, whether it's the facials. One of my favorite matches is like him and Triple H from SummerSlam '02,
Mm.
just because like whatever pain he was going through, I felt it through the screen. And not everybody can do that. But just overall, I thought his work in like '97 was great. His work when he came back up until 2010 was just remarkable, but Sean is going to be always my number one.
You brought up his selling there. What is your thoughts? And you're working on time for SummerSlam. What is your thoughts on Hogan Michaels at SummerSlam '05?
Um, I understand. I mean, again, I don't know what his true feelings were. I think my maybe part of it was like, you know what, like, because he's talked about it where the situation was like, you know what, like, I didn't think he was doing good business. So I think he was trying just to make the best situation out of it. And you just got to have fun,
Mm.
right? And I've been there where I'm like, you know what? I'm not digging this vibe. So let me just at least try to have fun with it. And the fact that we always look back at us selling, like he was probably having fun because you know what? Like I hate how this is getting played out, but yeah, it is overdone. He did overdo it, but if that what makes him put a smile on his face, and then I'm all for it.
Then finally, a question on Shawn Michaels before we do the wrap up question. Another one. What was your thoughts on his 2018 comeback?
Oh my God, I wish it never happened. I think I'm more traumatized by the bald head.
Mm.
Because like we always remember like Shawn Michaels, especially like WrestleMania 14 when he had like the French braid and everything. Uh but I'm like, dude, he's like completely bald. Like he not even and I don't mean balding. He was completely
Yeah.
bald. And so that was like that's kind of the image where I'm like, was that part necessary? Um like the match wasn't as bad as everybody says it is. I've seen many worse matches. But yeah, I do wish it didn't happen. It's all because his last match before that was Undertaker at Mania 26, and that was a masterpiece as well. So, I guess we'd always like to think as somebody's last match being, the final exclamation point, and it does kind of suck that it's no longer that one from Mania 26.
That's really, really cool. As we wrap this up, George, obviously, I want to say thank you for a great conversation. But the question I end this show on is I believe as YouTubers, podcasters, even just people with social media, we're also going to live forever in a very, very weird way if you think about the word. So, what is one piece of content you're like, I would like to be remembered for that? Then, what is one that you're like, yuck, please forget about?
Um, There is a lot of like even on my channel, I did a lot of like some of the early shows. There's a lot of we just talk about stuff, and but it wasn't like random stuff. It was like, oh, when Retribution started, right? Like, is it a hit or a miss or things like that? Uh, and it's not so much that it's like cringe right now. It's just more like I didn't know what I was doing. I thought I had to follow a certain formula
Mm.
because I was trying to be like someone else or something else that I feel like I can never rewatch. I mean, it's still out there, so I'm not gonna take it down. Uh, but I cringe because I'm like I feel like I was trying too hard to not be myself, but it's just like I felt like I thought this is the way how to do it, but in reality, you just kind of have to do what do what you think is best as opposed to what you think everyone else is doing.
Yeah.
Um, but with that said, I there's a lot of good AfterBuzz shows where I feel like I was doing a good job. Especially when I kind of um started changing things up because before we would cover the pay-per-views and we would go in a chronological order, right? First match we talk about, second match we talk
Yeah,
about, and then we talk about the main event. And so I started switching things around because I felt like we didn't give the main event enough time. So I try to be more like ESPN, and that was more like back and forth hot take. So just being able to change things up and do that, I think that that was really cool to be able to kind of create it from like just an idea. Um, so that what I'm trying to incorporate a lot more. And but I know that there's a lot of other stuff that I'm trying to work on for my channel, that I'm hoping that will turn out really good.
that's really, really cool. Obviously, like I said, I want to say thank you, George, for a great conversation. But please promote yourself. Where can the good people find you, your work, etc.?
You can follow all my social media stuff at G Hermoza, GHERMOZA. You can follow my wrestling channel on YouTube, The Wrestling Chatter. It should be youtube.com/, The Wrestling Chatter. All the social medias are TW Chatter. So whether it's Instagram, Twitter, all that stuff, TW Chatter, I'm working on, putting some more content. I have a lot of cool interviews on my channel, from Eric Bischoff, Jacques Rougeau, the Mountie, Barry Horowitz. I got one coming up with one of the members of the Spirit Squad. Uh, I don't know how big it is outside of LA, but there was a group called XPW that existed
Yeah.
in the late 90s, early 2000s. um they were kind of mostly known for crashing that heat wave pay-per-view in ECW, and there's a lot of content there talking to a lot of the guys from XPW because they did make a presence in the wrestling world. So being able to talk to a lot of those people there, um talking to a lot of like California legends like Mike Modest. Um, yeah, just a lot of cool. I talked to Victoria, Vampiro. I'm sure there's more that I'm missing. But yes, go to the channel, give it a like, comment, subscribe. And there's gonna be some more cool stuff coming on that channel as well. The Wrestling Chatter YouTube channel.
It's well worth doing, guys. One of the hardest working people in this space, but one of the nicest as well. So if you guys like this, make sure you like, share, and subscribe to Tom Talks Rubbish on YouTube. Follow me on Twitter or X at Tom Talks Rubbish. And I will see you in the next one. Goodbye now.